This is a video presentation of Chapter 12, Section 3 in the 8th grade textbook, Using Slopes and Intercepts. We'll go ahead and start with the definitions here. The x-intercept is the x-coordinate of the point where the graph of a line crosses the x-axis. Simple way to say that is wherever the line or whatever goes over the x-axis. Y-intercept, same idea. It's the y-coordinate of the point where the graph of a line crosses the y-axis. Again, simple way to say it's where the graph of a line or whatever goes over the y-line, the y-axis. And slope-intercept form is a linear equation written in the form y equals mx plus b, where m represents slope and b represents the y-intercept. If you recall what we've done so far in this unit, what we did when we did graphing primarily is we talked about graphing in terms of the table method. And when we had the table method, that's a method that works for everything, but we have to compile a list of x's and then figure out what the corresponding y's are, and we make a graph. And then I said to you there's some specific ways now that we can actually graph a line given different forms. And this is where we start that. It's not so much work, perhaps, in terms of calculation. There might be some manipulation involved, but there really won't be any calculation involved as we work through some of these forms or different ways to graph a line. And that's what Chapter 12, Section 3 is going to be all about. Again, the x-intercept, that's the x-coordinate of the point where the graph of a line crosses the x-axis. The y-intercept is the y-coordinate of the point where the graph of a line crosses the y-axis. And slope-intercept form is a linear equation written in the form y equals mx plus b, where m represents the slope and b represents the y-intercept. So in this first question here, they're asking me to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept of the line 4x minus 3y equals 12. Well, let me go ahead and sketch a quick little coordinate plane here because this makes good sense once I do this. The x-intercept is where the graph goes over this line. Well, no matter where I'm at in the coordinate grid when it goes over this line, there's one thing that's always true. The y value is always going to be 0. Because I never have to go up or down to get to any point on that line. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. When we're asked to find the x-intercept, what we're going to do is we're going to let the y value equal 0. Same thing over here when we're finding the y-intercept. When I come back to my coordinate grid and I look at any number on the y-intercept, where the graph would go over this line, it doesn't matter where I am. All those things, all those points, have one thing in common. The x value on each one of these is 0 because we never have to go left or right to get to any of those points. And that's what we'll do when we find the y-intercept, is we let the x value equal 0. So, summation there, whatever intercept we're trying to find, let the other guy be 0, and that's how we're going to find it. So, when we do that, that means we're going to come up here to this equation, change whatever we need to into 0, figure out what's left, and that'll be my x or y-intercept. So the first one here where I'm finding the x-intercept when I let y equals 0, well, if I change this y into 0, that's 3 times 0 or 0, so that just kind of goes away. So it says 4x equals 12, which is what they're showing you right here. Well, we know that 4 times 3 is 12. So the x-intercept of the graph is 3. And then when we go over here and find the y-intercept, again, that's when we let x equal 0, well, if I change this into 0, 4 times 0 is 0, that just disappears. So it says negative 3y equals 12. Well, what do I multiply by negative 3 to get to 12? Well, I multiply negative 3 by negative 4 to get to 12. So the y-intercept is negative 4. So if I were to make a little graph here now, we know the x-intercept is 3. So across the x-axis, this line is going to hit at 3. And on the y-axis, this graph, the graph of the line here, is going to hit at negative 4. So I go down to 4 on the y-axis and connect those points, and that's going to be the graph of my line. And that's what we're going to do down here, I believe. And indeed, here you can see that. All right, we just figured out that the x-intercept is 3. So on the x-axis, I'm going to put a dot at 3. The y-intercept, again, is negative 4. So on the y-axis, I put a dot at negative 4. I connect those points, and that's the graph of the line 4x minus 3y equals 12. Think about it. If we did the table method of graphing here, we would have had to have done at least 5 calculations all the way through. Here now, because we didn't do that, we only did 2 calculations, and they both involved us using 0, which made a really simple equation. So obviously here, as I said in the beginning, a lot less work based on what content you actually have here. All right, let's go ahead and keep going down here. We'll take a look at the next example here. The next one is asking me to write the equation in slope-intercept form and then find the slope and the y-intercept. Now that's exactly what slope-intercept form gives us. It gives us the slope and the y-intercept. So that's a good thing because when they're asking me to find that, that's exactly what this form gives me. So as we go down the trough here, what we have to know first is that slope-intercept form that we saw in the definitions there. Slope-intercept form always shows up in y equals mx plus b form. The things that should be numbers in that form are m, which represents the slope, and b, which represents the y-intercept. That x and y are always going to say x and y in the equation when it's said and done. But if we look at this equation here, it doesn't really look like this setup here. First off, it has to have y by itself on the left side equal to everything else. Well, as you can see, y is not by itself on the left side because 2x is over here. So that's the first thing we're going to fix. Now what I want you to think of when we move things is I want you to think of solving equations. What do we do when we solve equations and we want to move something to the opposite side of the equal sign? Well, we always do the opposite. It's the same thing here, but you're not actually going to put anything together because there's no like terms to combine. So we're going to go ahead and take that 2x off both sides. As you can see, they're doing that by subtraction. And when I do that, I get y equals 3 minus 2x. Now that's a little bit better because if you notice the left side, it just says y equals, and here it still says y equals. But after that y equals should be the term with x. And as you can see, that term with x here, all right, is actually the last thing. So now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and flip this around, which is why they're telling us to rewrite this. So when I do that, I have y equals negative 2x plus 3. Notice here when I cover up the 3, that says negative 2x. When I wrote it down here, it still says negative 2x. When I cover up that 2x, it says positive 3. When I cover it up down here, it still says positive 3. And that's exactly the correct way to do this. All right, so the equation now is in slope-intercept form. I've got y equals, I've got an x term, and then I've got a number at the end. All right, so I have everything I need. Now I just need to go answer the actual question. The question, again, was asking me to find the slope and asking me to find the y-intercept. Well, the slope here is the number that's in front of x. Remember, slope is the degree of tilt that line is going to have, the comparison of its rise to its run. In this case, it's going to be negative 2, and if you want, you can write it as a fraction like we talked about yesterday, negative 2 over 1. So that means the line, even if we don't sit here and draw it, we know it's going to be going down from left to right, because any line with a negative slope points down from left to right. The b number, the y-intercept, that's where the graph is going to go over the y-axis, just like we talked about in the previous example here. Well, that number out here says plus 3, so that's going to be a positive 3. So it's going to go over the y-axis at the 3 marker. Right there. So, slope of the line, 2x plus y equals 3. That's the negative 2 over 1, or negative 2. And the y-intercept is 3. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next question here. It says a video club charges $8 to join and $1.25 for each DVD that is rented. The linear equation y equals 1.25x plus 8 represents the amount of money y spent after renting x DVDs. Graph the equation and explain the meaning of the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so now we're not even going to have to do the intercepts method like we did in question 1. Now we're going to use this form to figure out everything. Remember, in slope-intercept form, we have 2 values. You have this number in front of x when it's written correctly. That's m. That's the slope. So that's the first thing they're asking us here for. So we're going to write down 1.25, or if you want to write it as 1.25 over 1, that would be more than acceptable. Slope here is that number at the trailing end of the question, in this case 8. That represents where the graph goes over the y-axis at. And as you can see, we've got a graph there, so we'll use that in a minute. So the slope of the line is 1.25, or 1.25 over 1. And the y-intercept here is 8. What that means is the line's going to cross over the y-axis at 0, 8, and then moves up 1.25 units for every 1 unit it moves right. Now, maybe you're looking for an explanation here. Let's go at it, because we have not actually graphed using this technique proper yet, and that's probably where we need to go here. When you're in slope-intercept form, like this question is, the first thing you want to do is plot this y-intercept number, which is this number here at the end when it's written correctly. So the y-intercept number here is 8. So on my y-axis, because again, it's always the y-intercept, I'm going to go ahead and put a dot at 8. Then what you want to do after you plot the y-intercept is you want to come back and look at the slope, which we said was 1.25 over 1. You're then going to plot the slope in the same way we did previously. Remember, slope represents the rise and the run. So this means I'm going to rise 1.25 units and run 1 unit. How do we do that? Well, that's really simple. From this point you already made, that's where you're going to start rising and running. So we already plotted 8, which is right on this line. Now I'm going to rise 1.25 units and run 1 unit. So that means from this point I'm going to go up 1.25 and go to the right 1. So from here, if I go up 8 to 1.25, that's going to be 9.25 and over to 1, which is actually this point here. Then I'm going to go up another 1.25 units and go right another 1. Now that's actually the first dot that they plotted here, because as you can see on the grid markers here, that's marked at 2. All right, we've gone up that 1.25, got us to 9.25. Up again, the next one would get us to 10.5, and then 1 and 1 to the run. That's how I came up with 2. And you can keep repeating that process over and over and over again as many times as you need to gather as many points as you want on the line. And that's all you do. Plot the y-intercept number first, then look at that slope and plot the slope based on whatever it is it tells you. Remember, if the rise number is negative, you're going to go down, but we are always running to the right. So if the slope is negative, go down and then go right. If it's positive, go up and then right. So now let's look at what these numbers mean here. All right, the y-intercept here represents the charge for joining. How do we know that? Well, take a look. Where does the graph go over the y-axis at? It goes over at 8. If we come back up here to the question, it said initially that the club charges $8 to join. So the y-intercept represents what you have to pay for just joining. Whether you end up renting 1 DVD or 2,000 DVDs or even no DVDs, you have to pay $8 just to be in the club. And then the slope here, the slope represents the charge for each DVD. All right, we said here we were paying $1.25 for each DVD. The slope was equal to 125 over 1, or 125. So the slope here represents how much I'm then paying for each DVD. That's why the first value on the x-axis matches up with 9.25, because I pay my $8 to join plus that $1.25 for the first DVD is how I get to $9.25.